Hello and welcome to lesson 5.09, looking ahead. Today's lesson covers pages 961 to 963 in the only book known to history to have said that it had experience in foreign policy because it could see Russia from its house in Alaska. That is the American Odyssey, our textbook, and our goals for today. We want to identify the candidates and major issues of the election of 2008. We also want to explain why the primaries and national election of 2008 were groundbreaking. And last but not least, assess the major issues facing the United States in 2009 and beyond, as Buzz Lightyear may say. All right, so let's get into it. Usually I have one of you all read this blurb, but I guess I will read it today since we are not live together. The presidential election of 2008 was a historic and groundbreaking election for the first time in more than 50 years. Neither an incumbent president nor a sitting vice president ran for president. The party's candidates came from a greater variety of backgrounds than ever before. And in the end, the Republicans nominated Senator John McCain, the Democrats, Senator Barack Obama. One of the central themes of the election was experience versus change. The outcome of the election was clear, but what no one could know for certain was how America would handle major issues in the years to come. How's that for a preview? All right, so the 2008 election on the Republican side. So first, I guess let me back it up a little bit before I get into all this. The last couple of lessons, we've talked about what's been happening in the United States during the George W. Bush presidency. So if you remember some of the things going on, Bush initially wanted his presidency to focus on domestic issues. So he passed a big tax cut. He signed No Child Left Behind that everybody was super pumped and happy about in the end. Facetious there. And then also he worked to lower Medicaid prescription drug costs. Limited stem cell research, things like that as well. But also kind of coming after President Clinton, who had balanced the budget, Bush grew that deficit. So deficit spending went up during the Bush administration. But then also, towards the beginning of his administration, we had 9/11 happen, right? So that shifted the focus, and we entered this whole war on terror era that started with the Bush administration, is going to continue into the Obama administration as well. I guess that was a spoiler alert there, but it will continue to the next administration. But so that's where we're at. United States, about a month after 9/11, goes to war in Afghanistan. The idea that that's where we're going to find Al Qaeda. That's hopefully where we're going to find Osama bin Laden. It's not where we find them. Well, at least Osama bin Laden. And then also in 2003, a couple years later, we go to war in Iraq. So we're fighting two wars at the same time. And both Afghanistan stays a little bit more popular because of the mission to try to find bin Laden. But Iraq over time grows very unpopular. And as we mentioned in the last lesson, the whole reason or justification for having a preemptive war in Iraq was proven false. There were no weapons of mass destruction, and there was no link between Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden or Al Qaeda, as the Bush administration had previously claimed. And that's why a lot of people here in the United States was like, okay, yeah, we're cool with going to war with Iraq because of those things. And then when it turns out those things are false, the war becomes vastly unpopular. Add to that something that we haven't mentioned yet. Towards the very end of the Bush administration, the last maybe 6 to 10 months or so, the U.S. economy starts falling into a recession, which is later going to become known. We're going to call it the Great Recession. So you have all these things piling up. And remember what political party George W. Bush was. He was a Republican. So you have a Republican president going out. He's finishing his second term, and so that's where we're at in the 2008 election season. So big long run up to get to this point. So all right, the 2008 election on the Republican side, Senator John McCain becomes the Republican nominee. He is a longtime senator. Had been in the Senate for I don't know how many years, but a long time, a couple decades, I believe. He was from Arizona, former World War II, I believe, vet. I think World War II or Vietnam. I think it was pretty sure it was World War II. I should know that. Sorry. But anyway, longtime senator from Arizona emerged as a nominee for the Republican Party. And he was kind of known as being like, people called him a maverick because he wasn't always he didn't always just toe the party line. Again, he was a Republican, he was conservative, usually sided with Republicans and with conservatives on most issues, but not always. He would be known to split, and he was his own man. Didn't have to always like I said, toe that party line. So he would split on key issues from time to time. He had a broad cross-section appeal to voters. And, the biggest kind of question mark going into him being the Republican nominee was, who was he going to pick as his running mate? Who would he pick to run alongside him to be his vice president if he were to win that election? And in a bold and surprise move, he chose the relatively unknown governor of Alaska, Sarah Palin, as his running mate. So here is Sarah Palin here. Again, she was governor of Alaska, but nobody before this, unless you lived in Alaska, nobody had heard of her before. And so people, pundits and things were pretty shocked that's who he chose. It was a surprise move. On the Democrat side, so they're going into this election, right? They haven't. Bill Clinton was the last Democrat president, and that was 8 years ago at that point when he left office. So the big question mark in the primary race was who's going to win, because you had Hillary Clinton, former first lady. Her husband was president. She was running, and I think at the time, especially early on in this race, most people thought she would win the nomination. But then you had a very young first-term senator, U.S. senator from Illinois, former state senator in Illinois also, Barack Obama, ran against her in that primary. So the Democratic primary race was historic because when it came down to these two candidates, and they were the two, had a pretty tough primary fight against each other. Whoever would win this primary race, who would ever be the Democratic nominee, would be historic, because for the first time, if Hillary Clinton wins, she would be the first woman major party nominee for president. And if it was Barack Obama, if he won, he would be the first African American major party nominee. Women and African Americans had run for president prior to this time, but never endorsed by one of the two major parties, Republicans and Democrats. So it was going to be historic no matter who won. Barack Obama kind of came into national prominence because he delivered the keynote speech at the Democratic National Convention in 2004. John Kerry was the Democratic nominee running against George W. Bush in his reelection bid. And that speech really kind of put Obama on the map, and yeah, he would soar from there. So for number 2 here, in what was a very close primary race, Barack Obama emerged as the winner and would become the Democratic candidate for president, and he would choose Senator Joe Biden as his running mate. Excuse me. Obviously now, you all are familiar with Joe Biden because he was previously president. But Joe Biden is somebody who, kind of similar to McCain, very long time senator, had been in the Senate for decades. He had previously run for president before, and never made it out of the primary process to be the party nominee. So because Obama was so kind of young and inexperienced on the national level, he'd only been a senator for 2 years. Um, a This pick was seen as like him hedging his inexperience with the vast amount of experience in national politics that Senator Biden had at the time. All right, so for number 3 here, some of the groundbreaking and historic aspects of this election. As it was mentioned in that blurb, this is going to be the first time in 50 years that neither an incumbent president, so that means somebody running for re-election, nor a sitting vice president was a candidate. So typically in a presidential election, you have somebody that's running for re-election if it was their first term, or if, say, the president that was in office is finishing their second term, typically whoever was their vice president will run for the presidency. So this was the first time that you didn't have that happening in nearly 50 years. Also, serious candidates emerged from a greater variety of backgrounds than ever before. Again, you have either a woman or an African American for the first time ever. Obviously, we know Barack Obama wins that nominee, so he's going to be the first African American to be the major party candidate. And also with McCain, his vice presidential choice was a woman. So if McCain wins this election, Sarah Palin would be the first female vice president in history. And then that last note there, Democratic race narrowed to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. The candidate of the Democratic Party would be either the first woman to win a major party's nomination for president, or the first African American to do that. Some of the major issues of the election, these were the key talking points back and forth between the candidates. Again, Obama wins the nominee and is the Democratic candidate running against John McCain. So that was an issue. Again, Obama was young, relatively inexperienced, and McCain, as a contrast, long experience in government. Again, had been in the Senate for decades. McCain also criticized Obama for poor judgment in his choice of associates. He had a pastor back in Chicago and a political associate that were viewed as being radicals. So that was kind of a minor issue. It turned out to be not a whole lot to it, but it was a big deal for a little while. Critics also questioned the qualifications of Sarah Palin, McCain's running mate. Again, nobody really knew who she was until he picked her, unless he lived in Alaska. And when she would do some television interviews and would be asked some maybe complex questions, she didn't always give the best responses. So that was a big criticism. Obama was considered to have very little experience in foreign affairs. So that was something that the McCain campaign jumped on. And one thing that the Obama campaign used was, again, as I mentioned leading up to this lesson, Republicans, the George W. Bush administration was on a downward trend because of the unpopularity of the war in Iraq and the Great Recession and Hurricane Katrina response and some other things. The approval rating of what people thought of how George Bush was doing as president was really, really low. So Obama used that and said, "Hey, if we elect McCain, you're just going to get 4 more years of the same failed policies of George W. Bush." So the Obama campaign really, really tried to hammer that idea home that if McCain wins this election, it's just going to be more of the same of what's already unpopular. Also, the war in Iraq was a big topic of this election. McCain was a little bit more supportive of it. Obama was more like, if I get elected, I'm going to find a way to get us out of Iraq. And also, again, the economy is always going to be a big part of any presidential election. And this was really in the early stages of the Great Recession. So the economy was a big deal in this election as well. So how did it turn out? Here's our election map. You can see the results here. All of the states in blue are the ones that voted for Obama. The states in red for McCain. If it's a darker blue, it means that Obama won that by a wider margin. If it's lighter, it was a closer race. Same thing with the red for McCain. But all in all, Obama wins 353 electoral votes to McCain's 185. And if you look at that popular vote total up here in the top left, almost 10 million more votes for Obama. So a pretty clear victory there for now President Obama. I found this graphic one time when I was looking up election results, and I just thought it was funny, so I put it on here. So again, that's historic because with Obama winning this election, he becomes the first African American president in U.S. history. His presidency has, you all might not think it's just recent because it has been not quite 10 years since, close to 10 years since he was president, but yeah, it's still pretty recent in history. So it's going to take time for us to fully step back from and evaluate his presidency from a historic perspective. But we'll take a look at it anyway. See some things. So some of the highlights and lowlights potentially that people might point to of Obama's 2 terms in office. He will be reelected when he runs for reelection. So on the highlight side first, he was able to pass a major health care reform that was known as the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. That is currently still the system that our health care is under. That was both, I guess I'll go over the lowlights too. That was both very popular and both very unpopular. It was passed completely along party lines, and Republicans really rallied against it and would win some big elections in the future, campaigning against it. So it can be seen as a positive or a negative, depending on your political perspective. Back to the highlights. He formally declared the end of the Iraq War in December of 2011, something he campaigned that he would do. Critics might say it took him a little bit longer to end than they would have liked, but ultimately he does deliver on that campaign promise and ends the Iraq War in 2011. Also, he didn't do it personally with his own hands, but oversaw the capture, not really capture, but the killing of Osama bin Laden. Again, bin Laden had planned that 9/11 attack on the U.S. and had, that happened in 2001, September 11, 2001. The United States had been hoping to capture or kill him ever since, and it doesn't happen until 2012 or 13, I think it's 2012. So a full 10 years later. But so that was seen as a big victory for him. He also oversaw the bailout of the auto industry. Again, views on that can differ based on political perspective. However, generally seen by most, especially economists, as a positive outcome. He also announced plans to end the war in Afghanistan in 2014. However, does not follow through on that. The war in Afghanistan doesn't actually end until Joe Biden is president. He ended the very unpopular "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" policy of gays in the military. That's something we had previously talked about with the Clinton administration. So now, if you are in the LGBTQ community, you can serve openly in the military without fear of being dishonorably discharged if it is found out that you are gay. He also passed student loan reforms and also passed credit card reforms. which were fairly popular. He supported the legalization of same-sex marriage. We'll talk more about this in upcoming weeks, but when he's first elected, it's legal in a handful of states. During his presidency, due to a Supreme Court ruling, same-sex marriage eventually becomes legal in all 50 U.S. states. And he nominates 3 Supreme Court justices, the first, Sonia Sotomayor, the second, Elena Kagan, and then the third, Merrick Garland. However, Merrick Garland would not ever serve on the Supreme Court because Senate Republicans refused to hold a confirmation hearing for him. Some of the potential lowlights. Again, I mentioned that healthcare was used against him, and also when it was first rolled out, it was kind of a big failure, mostly due to technical issues. The website healthcare.gov crashed all the time, and so that was kind of seen as kind of a failure. The national debt continued to go up under President Obama. The economic recovery from the Great Recession moved along too slowly, as most critics would argue. Eventually, the U.S. is going to recover from the Great Recession, but again, it took years, and most hoped that it wouldn't take that long. Also, before Obama was elected president, Democrats had control, a majority in both the House and the Senate. During Obama's presidency, Democrats would lose control of both the House and the Senate, lose that majority. So again, that kind of shows maybe the nation isn't with a lot of his policies and decisions. He is often criticized for escalating drone attacks, especially in the Middle East, on potential terrorist targets, and what goes along with that. Usually, that might involve the death of innocent civilians and things like that. So that's another major criticism. He also had promised in his initial campaign that he would close Guantanamo Bay as a military prison, basically, which at that point was used to house suspected terrorists. That's where there was, during the Bush administration, enhanced interrogation techniques were used, which we now classify as torture, things like waterboarding. So Obama had promised that he would close that, but he did not go through with that. So Guantanamo Bay is still open. And also, he had issues dealing with the Republican Congress, especially once they gained control of both houses. Some of those issues were fights over the debt ceiling, sequester. There's actually, I think, 2, maybe 3, at least 2 government shutdowns because of the 2 not being able to work out some things. There's a major issue in Syria we'll talk more about in a future lesson, and also that dealing with Merrick Garland, his Supreme Court nominee. So with all that being said, obviously we can't talk back and forth, but just think about it. What do you think? So from some of the things you might remember a little bit of Obama being president. I'm trying to think how old you would have been, like so I guess 10 years ago. So yeah, you would have been still pretty young, but you might remember. Maybe you've heard your parents talking about it. What do you think? How do you think history will remember the Obama presidency? So just curious to obviously, I can't hear your thoughts because we're not communicating in real time with each other. But just think about it. What do you think? All right. So that's the lesson. Let's do the checkpoint, and you can stop watching this recording. This is a select all, which were major issues in the 2008 presidential election: the continuing war in Iraq, McCain's inexperience in foreign affairs, the economic crisis, a stable, prosperous economy, the qualifications of Sarah Palin, and Obama's limited experience in foreign affairs. So we should select. Let me get a pen tool here. We should select the continuing war in Iraq. That was definitely a major issue in the 2008 election. McCain's inexperience in foreign affairs, we will not select because McCain was very experienced in foreign affairs. The economic crisis was definitely a big deal. Remember, it was the Great Recession. Also, so that means a stable, prosperous economy we will not select because the economy was not stable or prosperous. The qualifications of Sarah Palin, yes, that was an issue. She was seen as having not a lot of qualifications. And then also Obama's limited experience in foreign affairs. We will select that as well because he did have limited experience with foreign affairs. All right, so there you have it. There is your checkpoint. There is your lesson. This is one of my favorite images of the 2008 election before a one of the why do I always get tripped up on like a stupid word? Before one of the debates. Thank you, brain. You got it. Before one of the debates, John McCain tripped as he was walking on stage, and somebody snapped this picture in the midst of him tripping. So I just think it's hilarious. No shade to John McCain, R.I.P. By the way. I actually saw him. He did a campaign stop in my hometown of Tiffin. He didn't like give a speech or anything, but he kind of came through. You see his motorcade, and he stopped at like a local donut shop and kind of was in and out, and it was all happened pretty quickly. So I actually got to see him kind of in person. But anyway, so yeah, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next week.